Bonjour means crash positions. Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers. Here in your face. A music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. It's a fun time had by all. I'm Petey Rave, and honestly, I'm more of a peasant puce. Yeah. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my comrades. We've got David.
What the hell is a pleasant puce? What does that even mean?
Peasant puce.
Peasant plus?
Puce. Drew.
If we're talking about meanings, I want everybody to know Ohana means family.
Mm-hmm. And of course, still with us, our guest for these roundup episodes, the one, the only, Mike, aka Averant.
Hey.
Yeah.
The Bolana quote just...
I'm here. We're here. We're here to talk about music. We're talking about an album. The presenter of the album this week is none other than David. David, what do you have for us this week?
All right, Petey Rave, let me turn my hat around because it's business time. Also, because the hat keeps hitting my microphone. What I have brought is something that I've been waiting to bring to the Record Breakers podcast ever since I have joined it. In celebration of their 50th year in existence, Robert Fripp and his band put their entire musical catalog out for streaming for everyone to hear and see. That's right. No more YouTubing and having it getting taken down. No more going to Daily Motion. Yes, ladies and gentlemen and everyone in between, the one, the only, the mighty King Crimson has made their way to the Record Breakers podcast. And Petey Rave, normally on this podcast, it would normally be something like their debut album, 1969's In the Court of the Crimson King. But no, David doesn't do the meatballs. Oh, no. That would be like, let's bring Led Zeppelin 4. Let's bring Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. No, we're not doing that. We are going to bring my album selection from 1974, the King Crimson album, Red.
Mm-hmm. Let's get to...
No meatballs.
Unless it's in a sub. Let's get down to expectations. Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
Well, having known progressive rock literally at all, King Crimson is a band that I'm familiar with. Band I've heard probably a song or two of, just by, knowing guitar players that are also into progressive rock. You kind of have to. It just happens. But it wasn't ever anything that I dove into an album. And with prog rock, there is hearing the songs and hearing how they will compose a song and the musicianship therein. And then there's hearing how they sort of piece together an entire record and think through that. And I think hearing that is sort of puts it all into a better context. So I was excited for more contextual clues for this album.
Mm-hmm. Mike, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
So I'm going to say something slightly horrible off the go. So when I first was going to do this, I got it completely mixed up, and I thought it was going to be a King Diamond album, and that is not what I thought it was going to be. So,
although I have brought up King Diamond on this podcast before.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they're too far away time-wise. I feel like they're pretty far away sound-wise, so I wasn't really sure. I've heard of it before, but I didn't have as much framework as I should have. I guess I've listened to, in terms of prog rock, Genesis, Rush, and Mars Volta, and that's pretty much my exposure to it. So I was kind of interested to see this stuff that everyone always tells me everything that I listen to is based on.
Yes. I'm
as I like to say, Petey, King Crimson, particularly this album, is what I like to call the black tar heroin prog.
Yes.
This would probably be within the guidelines of the Rusty Venture not wanting his son to turn into an evil scientist prog, if you're familiar with that episode of the Venture Brothers.
Yeah. I definitely had some expectations on this. I wasn't sure exactly what to expect, but I had some idea. I've heard the name mainly probably out of David's mouth, and I was interested to see kind of what we were going to get into. But yeah, David, how about you get into it deeper? How would you describe this album musically?
As I said, this is not in the court of the Crimson King. At the time when this album was being composed and written, Robert Fripp was at a point with King Crimson and progressive rock in general where he felt that it was just kind of falling apart. So that's what came out in this album. There is a great deal of chaotic, almost negative energy throughout this album. It is dark and weird in a lot of places, but it is still very much a Robert Fripp project. You can hear what makes King Crimson through all of this. He had even admitted at the time of making this that the album that he started with in the Court of the Crimson King sounded like, quote, a dinosaur to him, and it had only been 5 years. And he had completely flipped the lineup of King Crimson at this point. Completely different lineup. This was a trio with John Wetton on bass and vocals and the legendary Bill Bruford as the drummer, just completely flipped around. And this was around the time where the entire band was just in a very weird place, and they broke up pretty much right after this album came out. I don't even think they toured.
Yeah. Drew, how would you describe this album musically?
Well, knowing that these guys were the Kings of Prague, I was expecting nothing short of like great musicianship. Them being very much the forefathers. This is definitely there. In like giant swaths. It was great from back to front for that. Well, from the original 5 tracks, we'll say. The composition was astounding to me from back to front. It is really weird to hear something this early in the progosphere, as it were. Mike, my prog is a little bit more modern, I guess. Your Rushes and your Mars Voltas and whatnot. It's different, but not so different. The ideas are still there, pushing rock music in different directions, using different instrumentations. Looking at the era this was in, 74, and having it be as really dark and brooding as it was, I really kind of set me back. I don't think of rock in 74 as that, I guess. So I wasn't expecting that bit of it. Now, as I sort of said, the original tracks, the original 5, I believe it was, were all great and all amazing. The improv stuff was kind of hit or miss for me, especially the Cosmos track just sort of didn't jive with me personally. I get why they're there, but if I was going to, say, put these songs on a playlist, they wouldn't really be included. I would even include the 5th track, which is like 12 minutes, before some of the shorter ones. And also what I was not expecting, I was expecting more of the instrumentation to just be your standard guitars, drums, and bass. There was strings all over the dang place. There was liberal use of saxophones.
This is King Crimson, mind you.
Yeah. There was oboes. Crap. They used for a second I was like, wait a second, is that what I think it is? Sure enough, there was a cornet in here. Like, hey, they're smart enough to say, we want the trumpet register, but we don't want it that shrill. And they're smart enough to just go, I just bring a cornet player in. Screw it. Like, it's just a level of like thought process that goes into those type of progressive rock guys that I super appreciate. It's something that it's prog guys and it's jazz guys that like really seriously get in the studio and like really break down and think about that stuff. And I can't help but like get it and absolutely adore them for it. So,
Mike, how would you describe this album musically?
So now that Drew hit almost every single point I had written down, it was like line for line. It was like, they have a cornet, they have it. I was like, oh, damn, you got all of this. The one thing I also want to hit back on, though, is the darker chord progressions, because I don't remember that being a key thing to how I listened to stuff in the 70s. Like, anything from the 70s usually had the lighter chords, the more majors, the major progressions and stuff like that. And it seems like more modern rock takes on a lot of the darker chords. It feels like this may be one of the areas they got it from, was King Crimson and hearing stuff like that. One of the things I came across when I was looking it up was that it was another major influence for Kurt Cobain. So that you can just see it being brought into the modern era from that time. Actually, specifically this album too, not all of King Crimson. One of the other things too is they actually had, as a full member, I guess, a violinist, which was part of the interesting. Because I was going to make a joke about his name being David Cross, but I was more fascinated that they have like a full violinist just constantly out.
Yeah.
But yeah,
They've always had a touring saxophone player.
Yeah.
A soprano and an alto.
I was going to also make the joke too, because the instrumentation threw me off at first, because I didn't expect to hear that many different instruments in it. And I was just like, well, I guess this is technically a ska band, but
Is this ska?
I don't think that joke goes over well.
No.
It's King Crimson.
Mhm.
It's King Crimson.
We are not men. We are King Crimson. Yeah. This album is dark and like experimental and it is very much like the study guide, you know, of like progressive rock, and this is the extracurricular off of the syllabus study guide. Like, this is like, all right, you got your basics, but you know what? You want that extra credit. You want to really get into this. You really want to get this is not prog rock 101 or prog rock 102. This is prog rock 103, when you've had enough credits, and at this point you're doing it as an elective. It's not even part of your.
It's time to really dig in.
Yeah. And this is really what it's all about. You get that professor that's tenured, that at this point is just doing this one class because he's really into that class, and he is insane, always shows up late, but he has that energy, doesn't know anybody's names, but he could passionately tell you about the subject matter.
So let's talk about Genesis, you guys.
Yeah, and I think music is just so cool, and it's so, and it's really cool and really interesting and really deep. But there is still fun here. Like there's still a lot of fun moments. Like as like for fun for being such a dark album. But if you kind of really enjoy like rocking out to like these heavy stuff, into these heavy guitar stuff, there's an enjoyment to be had if that's like what you're into, because like it's fun to kind of like watch that, listen to that, all dance around, and the guitar work and the different instrumentations and what decisions they make with some of the extra instrumentation that works so well in like that chaotic mood. And it works a lot on that regard. But let's talk about some of those key tracks. So we get into some of those key moments, because I guess there's only like in the album proper, there's only 5 tracks. Being very long songs is being originally a record that fit on a vinyl album,
An LP.
Exactly. So there's only 5 very long songs.
Played though.
Yeah. Long play for sure.
Hey,
But there's a lot of moments to be had. So, David, what will be some of the key moments for you on this album?
It's really hard for me not to just talk about every track. It's difficult. Starless is my favorite King Crimson song. For me, it is like definitive King Crimson, even more than anything from their debut album. It's just flawless as far as I'm concerned. I think John Wetton sings the chorus flawlessly. The outro to that song is just phenomenal. Providence. Providence is like the song that I would not give someone who is in Prog Rock Run 01. I would give this to someone that is in Prog Rock 312. Yeah. Providence. But I really enjoyed the hell out of it. One More Red Nightmare. It's a song about a plane crash. But it has something that I've talked about on this podcast many times. It is something that King Crimson originated by brand, a heavy saxophone that comes out of nowhere. King Crimson started that shit, folks. It was King Crimson. So your favorite rock or metal band that throws in a saxophone out of nowhere and it kind of blows your mind, thank King Crimson. And yeah, the opening track, the title track, is King Crimson doing a metal song, and it's really cool.
Yes. Drew, what would be some of the key moments or key tracks for you?
Well, the two that stuck out to me, and really made me remember this album were Red and Starless. With something like Red, I've said a lot on this podcast before. The opening track has to give you an idea of what you're getting into, so you know what the rest of it is. A first chapter of a book has to sort of set a lot up for you, and I feel the same way about first tracks of albums. It's also a title track. If you're going to name the album after the title of the song, that song has to be amazing. I think it filled both shoes very, very well. I think it absolutely hit both of those marks. And Starless. It is a 12-minute and 24-second song that feels like it's 5. The extra instrumentation in Starless, the way it builds into that and it melds everything around it, I think is amazing. The composition of it made it flow so well that you forget that you're listening to a song. It's sort of like that movie score moment that a lot of, for me, some prog songs can have, where you are almost picturing it in your head more than you're hearing the song, which I think is really cool. It's equal parts creepy sci-fi ending track and like exciting roller coaster at times, and it keeps bouncing between those two feelings the entire time, and it was just fantastic. I can see why it would be somebody's favorite song by a band.
Yes. Mike, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
So I actually had a hard time picking which song stood out the most, because when I was listening to it, by the time I got to the end of the song, I couldn't remember was it the beginning of the song. So I was like, wait, is this one the one I was listening, or was that the one I liked? I ended up coming down to it though. Fallen Angel was one of my top tracks. I think it's just a really great, solid song. It's probably not the most proggy out of all of them, but I thought it was just a really solid song. Especially because when he starts singing at the beginning of it, I was just like, I don't think I'm going to like this track very much. And then the rest of the thing just brought me back into it. Red, which we were talking about, you guys were talking about a second ago, that's a really cool, just kind of, it's not really straightforward metal, but it kind of plays as a metal instrumental. I dug that a lot. But then, so since this is a 101 class, I did my homework on this one, and it's Starless. It turns out the Starless's guitar riff, the first one, was rejected from their album right before that. So like they were just like, yeah, we're not going to use that. It's not good enough. And that like it kills me that riff at the beginning of that wasn't good enough, because that's crazy that they were
Mark's
just like
Tongue and Aspic, that album. Mark's Tongue and Aspic.
Yeah. Like there's like, oh, well, that's not good enough. But like it's a killer rip. Like I like how it jumps around everywhere, and it was like a seriously strong point for that song. And I wrote that halfway through, but then like the drums as well throughout that song are kind of all over the place. They don't really stay static. They have these little kind of half fills and stuff like that that are great. And the other part I have here is how fucking brave is it to bury like your amped up intense part of the song like 9 minutes and 12 seconds into the song. It's like if it was modern radio, it would be 3 songs in before by the time you get to like the like amped up crazy part of the song. I don't know if you could pull that off in today's music culture.
Or you could. I think you would have your like
just won't be played on the radio.
Which how much do you need to be played on the radio nowadays anyway? So
True.
So it's almost like you can't be popular with that, but you can find your audience nowadays with that. But yeah, it is definitely a different time back then than it is now. Yeah, Starless is just an epic song. It is just an epic song. It's so well made and so creative and so cool, and it's so it is like it has all the merit, I think, for why someone might make it their favorite song, like Drew said. It is so
Starless and Bible Black. That was the last album.
Yeah,
that was the album.
Yeah, and it was meant to be the title track, or at least it was an idea of John Wetton to kind of have it be the title track, and you can see why he had that idea. And it's almost a shame. It's almost a shame that the idea of like it could have like not made it on an album if they had broken up sooner. Like if they didn't make it to the end of this recording, they didn't like finish that we wouldn't have had that song as a track. I mean, there's also a bunch of other songs that are that song that we don't have because it didn't make it on an album soon enough. But that one, it would be a shame in retrospect in another universe if we didn't have it. But yeah, let's get back and bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
They got their notoriety for a reason, folks. The name is known around musician circles for a reason. These guys can compose a damn tune. It's exactly, if I said the words prog rock in 74, it's at times not what you would expect from 74, but exactly what you would expect from prog rock in 74. And it's just a well put together album that's definitely worth a listen.
Mm-hmm. Mike, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I feel like it filled because I never really understood the whole progression of prog rock from a musical standpoint. I feel like it filled in a large chunk of the story to me as to where like everything, where all that sounds came from, where the larger concepts came from that led into more modern prog rock. And I'm also, with part of my homework, like I don't want to claim to be part of the King Crimson thing, but one of the reasons I guess they broke up in 74 was that Fripp thought the world was going to end in 1981 and he wanted to prepare for it.
You found a guru.
Yeah. But it turns out I was born in 1981, so he was kind of right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I decided
and
not to end
saved
the world.
Everything.
It was cool, yeah.
And Crimson came back, so the world was saved.
Yes, exactly.
Fair.
It makes me think of that great lyric from the Dr. Hook song, Cover the Rolling Stone, aka that song they sing on Almost Famous. We got a genuine Indian guru who's teaching us a better way. It makes me think of like how many either Indian people, Indian Americans, or just brown folk in America did that hustle. That would have been a great hustle if nobody did it. Where you like become the Indian guru for some like self-important up and coming band. Like
I was going to say some rich asshole, but yeah, that too.
No, specifically all of these like fucking just selling some albums, have advances from their record labels that they're willing to blow on like wanting to find their music and find their soul, and you're just telling them some bullshit platitudes and some random shit from
wasn't
Hinduism.
much else in the 70s.
Feed them ayahuasca,
and then you get like a free meal ticket, a little bit of weed, a little peyote, a little, but Indian from actual India, and then you would have like from Hinduist platitudes, and just like wrote your meal ticket right there. I want to know that story. If anybody can hook me up with if anybody rocked that hustle, that would be amazing. But that being said, this album is really well made. It's really classic. It's a classic for a reason. It's epic. It's insane. It's chaotic, and it's so chaotically beautiful. And that's all I've got to say about that. David, finally, what is your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I believe Robert Fripp was completely justified in disbanding King Crimson after this album, and then completely reinventing the band 7 or 8 years later, because I really feel like there really wasn't much you could do after Red, and I understand where Robert Fripp was probably coming from on that. This was the time where maybe the style of rock music that they were playing was starting to get a little played out, and Fripp himself was feeling like maybe it was time for a change, and maybe it was time to go do some other things. He did, and good for him, but he went out with a bang with this one. This is a very dark and twisted album. I recommend giving this a listen in a well-lit area when you're in a very good mood. Otherwise, it will pull you into some weird and strange places. It is essentially a rock album, but it goes on all of the King Crimson twists and turns. There's going to be saxophone and violin and things you're not going to expect. And these things that make King Crimson, that were a part of their early sound. And it has this darkness that pervades, that kind of burrows into your head. And I think it really is kind of a cool vibe that makes you want to put it on repeat and just stay there for a little while. So I might be listening to this one later after we're done recording, just to get back into that place, because I really enjoyed the vibe of this album, as weird and as strange as it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is definitely a weird and strange vibe, but it's a wonderful one. Yeah, let's get down to the main event. Those are our thoughts on King Crimson, but let's get down to the main event of the evening, the moment we've all been waiting for, our haiku reviews. Let's get it poppin'. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno. Drew, what is your haiku?
Prog Rock Kings display compositional power. Stick to just the 5.
Mm-hmm. Mike, what is your haiku?
I see you, Drew. Progressive rock kings, not afraid of instruments, still an influence.
Mm-hmm. I've got my haiku here. Masterful prog rock may seem like homework from far, but there is fun here. And last but not least, David, what is your haiku?
Red's stuck in my head. Like a tattoo, not a worm. The best Crim album?
You would have a lot of supporters on that. Yeah, those are our thoughts on King Crimson's Red. And you can, of course, find it finally after 50 years. After, well, some of like 45 years on Spotify. First they had to invent Spotify. Then Robert Fripp had to decide.
And everywhere else.
It wasn't on Spotify like 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then Robert Fripp had to realize that maybe. And then now it is on our Spotify playlist. Robert Fripp provided it to us personally. You can listen to it there. On that Spotify playlist, you
May
can
he
listen.
be praised.
Yes. We have next week's album, and it will be provided by Drew. Drew, what do you have for us next week?
This is something that actually friend of the show. It's weird to say friend of the show when he used to be on the
Enemy
show.
of the show.
Enemy of the show.
Frenemy of the
Patrick,
show.
Patrick, aka the Swagger, was talking about on Twitter. It forced me to go, maybe I should give this album a listen. And I decided to. It was good. I don't know why I haven't brought it yet. Came out recently, so I haven't had a huge amount of time. But it's from a band from the far off land known as Canada. Pup, otherwise known as Pathetic
Exotic.
Use of Potential, with their album Morbid Stuff.
Mm-hmm. Puppies. So look forward to that next week.
Poppy.
No, not Poppy.
Is it Poppy?
I'm Poppy.
I'm Poppy.
Look forward to that next week, but that is next week, and this is this week, and you can of course find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Drew is
And if
at
you
X.
listen to this album, please at me. Please at me.
Exactly.
Please.
Drew is at X Jucifer X. Mike is at Aberrant Avarant.
Investigate Mars Argo.
Yes. I'm PD Rave. The show's at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com. If you want to email us, give us feedback. Rebelli.net for listen to other shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube. And elsewhere. You can find us on Apple Music, Google Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud. Anywhere you find podcasts, subscribe, like, share, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Still feel a little bad for Mars. Toodle.
Maybe I'm more of a yeoman vermilion.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.